to the very first episode of The Social Lens. My name is Jonathan Baez, and we're going to be looking over this social lens. And you might be thinking, Jonathan, what's a social lens? Well, it's where we zoom in into our everyday little moments of life. So this podcast is going to go over everyday little moments that we experience in life. These unspoken rules, these pop culture moments, different things that, we might see in our everyday to life situations, and we might be thinking, is there a science behind that? Is there more to it? You might be thinking, who is this guy? Who does he think he is? Thinking he can just talk about sociology like that. Well, I am a recent graduate, just got my degree in sociology. So I feel like I'm at least somewhat experienced to talk about these things, and just you can call me, a sociologist nerd per se, who's just really obsessed with why we do things and, why things happen in life. So, from the big social issues to the kind of the small and awkward habits that we have, stuff we really even talk about. My goal here is really simple. It's just to make sociology feel like a part of your daily life. Because honestly, that's what it is. Whether you have to, you know, have a little, um, make your mind explode, for example, a quick mind blowing fact, or just, a laugh. I'm just here, to spread the word, and have that kind of fun with sociology. And it's like how really our culture, our history, our surroundings really influence everything from our biggest life decisions to the tiniest awkward moments that we really even think about. And so now that introduction is out of the way, I kind of want to go over this first episode. You might have clicked on it thinking, what is this guy going to talk about? Eye contact? Exactly. Or not just eye contact, but we're going to be going over proxemics and different little things like that. And even if you don't have a degree, or you're not really versed in this kind of lingo, I'll go over it. You'll get to understand what we're talking about and such. So first of all, I want to talk about avoiding eye contact like a pro. Maybe you are avoiding eye contact already. Like you're looking at me in this video and you're like, who is this guy? I don't really want to talk to this guy. He's just a random new guy on the doing a podcast. But I just want to get your mind into this situation we're in. So I'll get you with a little hook. You step into an elevator and all of a sudden you lock eyes with a stranger. Somebody you never met before. And then this is a situation that's happened many times in my university. There was an elevator. It's kind of the only elevator a lot of people took. It was in the middle of the university center, and that was always sometimes packed. And we I always make sure not to make eye contact. I always make sure to go on my phone. I mean, the amount of hours I probably have on the weather app by itself, because I would just check the weather and just glue myself to the weather app. And it's not just the weather app. It's the alarm clock or whatever the hell other apps y'all use to just kind of like set yourself in there instead of being in the situation around you. But for those like 0.3 seconds, that you make eye contact with somebody, um all of a sudden your phone becomes like the most prized possession, and because it is, but not just the most prized possession. What I mean is the most fascinating object in your hand. Not just in your hand, but in the universe. All of a sudden nothing else is surrounding you. You're like in your own little bubble, and you're just surrounded by your phone. And you're kind of just thinking, why did I do that? But it's not something we just do. In elevators. It's something we do on buses and hallways, at the gym, this different just areas in life, these public spaces. And we all do it. Don't think, if you're an introvert, extrovert, doesn't matter what kind of person you are, or kind of like situation, you're gonna do it. So, for example, I mean, it also just depends on different cultures as well, but we'll dive into that more later. But today we're gonna be talking about, like I said, something so small yet so normal when you think about it, and that you probably never stop to really question about. But it's actually really loaded with sociology. And if you've never studied sociology before, it's don't you worry. It's kind of a crash course. This whole podcast is kind of a crash course, and really just talking about how sociology really is just basically the study of people. That's how you can understand it. When you think about sociology, it's just the study of people and society and why we study them. You know, we study people, relationships, and unspoken rules. Keep that in mind. Unspoken rules is one of the main things that we're going to be talking about, alongside other things as well. So, how we live our lives, together, and all of those rules really, and one of those rules really is to avoid those eye contact in public. So, we'll break down what's happening in those tiny little awkward moments from different sociologists. One of the sociologists we'll be going over, his name is Erving Goffman, his civil inattention theory, to Edward T. Hall's personal space theory, which is going over proxemics, and then to why rules change in different cultures. By the end of this episode, you'll be starting to notice these little social dances that we do, and why we do them. Everywhere we go. It might seem boring. It might seem, hey, it seems a little too educational, but don't trust me. We'll kind of delve away from that and go into more stuff we might know from day to day. So let's be real. You're on the bus, right? And someone glances your way. You're just there. The bus might be packed. The bus might not be packed. So just depending on how the bus is, the situation changes entirely. So think about it as a situational kind of rule also. But someone glances your way, right, on the bus. And you give this tiny little nod, like, hey, how you doing? That little dude nod, like, what's up? Or like, when you're driving, you're like, go ahead. Stuff like that, little nods, when you just to give that confirmation. But it's just enough to let them know, like, hey, I'm here, I see you, and I know you exist. And both of you kind of just immediately look away. It's like you've made a pact to never talk again. And it's very fascinating because, a lot of people do that. They kind of just see each other for half a second, not even a full second, half a second, and they automatically know you're not supposed to look at each other again, unless it's like serious. Or another situation for you is you're walking down a long hallway, whether it be at work, school, anywhere. You're just walking down a long hallway, and you spot somebody from 50 feet away. And for the next 10 seconds, you kind of just pretend to check your phone. No matter, I always do that. I check my phone, be like, oh, no one's texting me, no one's sending me a message. Like I'm phone is driving in Sahara Desert. Like I'm not getting anything. But you kind of just check it anyway, and you check the weather because that's, like I said, I got the most hours on the weather app. It's fascinating. But you're checking your phone, and you kind of don't want to lock eyes because when you think about it, just depending on how you feel, sometimes it can feel intimate, it can feel confrontational. Like, there's different ways of approaching it. Someone staring at you down, sometimes trying to be funny. I know my friends do it sometimes. We kind of stare at each other for too long, and you kind of laugh it off. But it's just kind of funny when you think about it. But also those fake actions too, to avoid those awkwardness. Whether you're walking, like I said, looking at your phone is one of those fake actions. But also at the grocery aisle, when you think about it, I always go when I go down Walmart or HEB. If you're from Texas, you know what HEB is. You kind of fake those awkwardness just by like looking at cans and stuff. I remember one time I was waiting for, I don't know why, I just waiting for this lady to kind of get off the aisle, and I was starting inspecting the damn chocolate chips. I don't know, I was just there looking like, wow, this is very interesting. I wasn't even there for chocolate chips. I was there for something entirely else. But I was there expecting it, like maximally, just maximally, that's not a word. Just looking at it very intensely, like I was like, wow, these chocolate chips. I mean, I guess I might as well get them. Big boy, screw it, right? But no, I try not to. I just kind of kept walking, but it's just that pretending to do something else, or just pretending to just avoid anything to avoid that, I guess, awkwardness. Because sometimes if you use a complete stranger, it's gonna be awkward. You don't know what that stranger's thinking, what their intentions, what their how their day is going. You don't know any of that. So to avoid that small talk or that awkwardness, you might just want to kind of completely avoid that. And like I said, previously, it doesn't matter if you're an introvert or an extrovert. Sometimes you just still don't want to talk to somebody. You can be having a bad day. You just don't want to have that connection with them for just like that half second. But going into that connection with sociology, how is this all connected to sociology? I was talking earlier about the sociologist Erving Goffman, and he talks about this theory, or this name for this theory, or this whole like rule, unwritten rule, for example. It's not really a rule, it's kind of like society has implemented it. It's called civil inattention. So when you think about civil inattention, you think that civil and the inattention, of course you put it together, that's how the word works. But it's that inattention, like that not paying attention to something that's going on around you. It's when you acknowledge really someone's presence, but you deliberately avoid them. So you're like, that person's there. I feel them that they're there. Maybe they're watching me, but I feel that they're there. But I kind of don't want to, talk to them. So I'm going to avoid this interaction. And it's not really out of rudeness per se, but it's kind of just polite if you think about it. It's not really rude. A lot of people do see it that way as rude, but it just depends on the person. But it's actually, like I said, polite in these public spaces. It's kind of saying, as I said previously, is that I see you and I respect your privacy, and I'm not going to bother you. A lot of people don't. A lot of people, every day, every single day in life is fast paced, and you don't know. You just gotta go, 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 go. We're all. Think about it. We're all cogs in a machine. We're all constantly just going, moving, moving. I mean, life doesn't stop. So you're not gonna be like 5 seconds and tell them, hey, thank you for respecting my privacy and stuff and everything. But that's really what kind of some people are thinking. Thank you for respecting me and this and that, and I'm not gonna bother you. So that's why a lot of people do this civil intention, and they don't do it on purpose. They just kind of something that happens now. It's just like a part of our everyday life. It's like waking up in the morning. It's just something that happens. So without this unspoken rule that we have, public spaces could feel kind of chaotic when you think about it. Every elevator ride can be a forced conversation you just don't want to have. You know, um, every train ride can be a networking event. All of a sudden, you're just talking to every single passenger on a train of a couple hundred people. And civil intention keeps kind of order in these places, and every single places that we, every single place, my bad, that we share with strangers. So there's another part of it, and this was from communications, and it's called proxemics. A great mentor of mine, Dr. Ivy, spoke about proxemics. Proxemics, sorry. And it's that personal space theory. Edward T. Hall spoke about or introduced this concept of proxemics. So think about proxemics. There's 4 layers. Proxemics. There's the the public, the social, the family, and then there's also the intimate. So there's different zones that we have, or when you think about like I said, there's public, social, personal. That's what I meant, and then intimate. But that's how he mapped out those 4 zones, and that's how And most of the time, when strangers are around us, they're definitely in our public or social zones. But crowded elevators, subways, concerts, people can shove right into each other, and then they're shoving onto you, and all of a sudden your public or social zone, your public or social zone, all of a sudden just turns into personal space or personal zone. And this space is usually reserved for friends or family. That's why a lot of people also call it the family or friend space. But this closeness can feel intrusive. It can feel just kind of invasive. And that's how we compensated by really trying to avoid, excuse me, try to compensate it by avoiding this direct eye contact with each other, or at least in those spaces. We've all learned about this like social formula, so far, and this is the norm when you think about it. This is normal now. Like I said, it's just waking up out of bed every morning. It's just that way we can have that social efficiency. A brief acknowledgement is just just kind of looking at them a little bit and be like, hey, I see you, and then looking away. But and like I said, it can mean polite. But too much eye contact with a stranger, it can feel intense, intimate. It can feel confrontational, and then none at all though. Like if you don't even like if somebody gets on a bus or somebody gets on like somewhere, and they just kind of give you a little look, like, or they don't even look at you at all. That can feel dismissive. I mean, not that I hate, but I just like no eye contact. I love when people make eye contact. I mean, like I said, not for too long, but I would like to feel that I'm seen, that I'm there, and that sweet spot really is that micro glance followed by a disengage. So kind of little look, and then kind of keep doing your own thing. So we have that efficiency, but then we also have the anxiety. So we're going kind of into the area of introvert and extrovert. And it's kind of my favorite thing to talk about because I'm a little bit of both. I'm a little bit of introverted, but I'm mostly extroverted. I'm more extroverted than introverted. But when you think about it, like I said, going back to that social efficiency, we're in these transitional spaces. We're going from home to a bus to school, or we're going from home to bus to school, or I already said that, home to like these different transitional spaces that take us from one destination to another. So whether it be like home to a grocery store, you're going to the grocery store because you gotta get groceries to go back home. So go home, grocery store, back home. In all these places, you're transitioning, doing something. You're in these public social spaces, and if we're constantly doing small talk in all these spaces we go to, it would drain us. And but that's not different. That's different for like Mexican households, for example, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But it's all tied also to social anxiety. These individuals who have like to avoid these interactions to minimize like their discomfort. If they're constantly talking to people, constantly doing this, doing that, and these social functions, it can be very discomforting for these individuals. And this behavior really serves as a function. It preserves our mental energy, and it really keeps us life, running smoothly, running left foot, right foot forward. Just kind of like that cog in the machine that we are, or whichever kind of analogy you want to use for life. But that's what I like. That's how I see it, or not life, but society. So one of my favorite topics in this whole situation is with society or sociology as well as just culture is one of my favorite things to explore because culture, when you think about it, it's different for everybody. Culture, one culture sees it this way and another culture sees it that way. So talking about this efficiency and this anxiety, like I was saying, you know, avoiding these interactions to minimize discomfort. But if we're constantly small talking everywhere we are, that would also drain us. But like I said, that's not how it's different from Mexican households. My mom, she's very Mexican as they come. Mexicano, yeah, already know. But every time we go to Ross or any kind of store, and she saw her homegirl or whatever, say, hey, how you been? And they would talk and talk. I mean, I remember one time I was in Ross for about 30 minutes, and all we needed to do was grab some clothes. And we were looking for discounts, and we didn't even get nothing. We only got like one item, but we were there for 30 minutes talking to this lady. I didn't even know what the hell the lady was. We were just there talking to her. And I wasn't even engaged in this conversation. I was drained already. But you see, it's just different in these cultures that we have that you know, some might be used to it, some might not be used to it, some might love it actually. For example, look at a huge city like New York City. Making eye contact with every stranger would feel exhausting. I mean, you don't understand, like the millions of people, especially going to Times Square or something, and you're constantly looking at everybody in the eye. I mean, it could even look suspicious, honestly. You can look like a criminal or something, kind of staring people down. I mean, it's very dodgy. Or in these smaller towns, where everybody kind of knows each other, it might feel a little more comfortable because, you kind of know everybody. But also ignoring them can seem kind of cold or unfriendly. So you kind of want to. So it just depends. Like I said, this is all a very situational kind of role in society. So cultural norms set these expectations for how much acknowledgement is enough. Really, there's different things that we can acknowledge, different things that we can um, see, and what is enough. Is it enough eye contact, or is it not enough eye contact? Even intentionally, the rules vary. In some cultures, sustain eye contact is a kind of a sign of respect, and in others, it's confrontational. So, like I said, is it enough eye contact or is it not enough eye contact? It's kind of like going, like I said, into these different cultures. You don't really know until you kind of explore that culture, and that's why I love sociology, because sociology takes time to explore these different cultures. And if you understand a culture when you go travel, so to say, you go to a country like India, for example, if you understand and learn their culture before you go, that's basically sociology. You're understanding their culture, understanding their religion, you're understanding their if you make eye contact is good enough, or stuff like that. If you're understanding them, that's very good. You know, but some more everyday life examples. When you think about it, we have think about a crowd. Subway versus an empty bus. So when you think about a crowded subway, you don't want to really make eye contact with anybody, especially the dudes in front of you. Like y'all holding onto those little bars and stuff, and then the dudes are in front of you, and you're just kind of like, I don't want to, I don't want to make eye contact with this guy. He's literally like a breath away from me. I don't want to talk to this dude or even look at him, honestly. Or, but then it's different when, you're on an empty bus. You might see that one stranger. Because if you think about it, empty, sometimes it is empty, but sometimes it's not empty. You might see one person, and then you might kind of like nod and then start chatting with them because it's the only person there. You kind of feel less inclined because you don't got to talk to everybody else. You only got to talk to this one person, and it feels a little bit better. It's a weight off your shoulders. But on a packed train, going back to that, is people stare at the floor. People stare at their phones. People stare even at the ads on the wall. For example, I remember when I went to Disney World, this past couple months. In the when you're there, you go to the hotel and there's a bus that takes you to the parks and such. When we were traveling, I was like looking at my phone, of course, but all these times, I mean, in the morning you had to get to the buses and you had to be there like early because if you're even a little late, I mean, even then, the buses are gonna be packed. So all these buses are packed. You're either standing, you're sitting, whatever, right? But they're so packed. Like I said, you just gotta either look at your feet, look at the wall, look at outside the window, or try because I'm trying to look past people because like if there's a person by the window, it kind of if I even look at the past them into like there's a window outside, it's gonna be like it feels like I'm looking at them. So that's when I also just kind of like start looking at my phone and you start looking at the ads. In the gym, there's another mostly in the gym. There's a lot of unspoken codes as well. But like it's like no talking on treadmills. Minimal eye contact between sets. Stuff like that. Unless you're creeping, you're gonna be like, good job, good job. You keep pushing, keep pumping, keep pumping. You just kind of don't want to make that much eye contact. I mean, because the gym is very confrontational space. A lot of people are building muscle, losing weight and stuff like that. If someone usually how people when you go to the gym, you want to kind of have that I'm tough, I'm tough mentality because it is a good mentality to have when you're pumping and stuff, you're pushing those weights because you want to be angry, want to push some things, but there's a lot of different ways to approach that, and there's different ways to kind of just like follow those rules, that unspoken rule. And as well as like kind of going back to the grocery store is that aisle standoff and kind of just the way kind of side swiping each other. If someone's coming this way, you're going that way. And, just kind of just trying to avoid each other, not even look at each other, or just kind of like try not to give way to them. As well in the workplace with those especially long corridors or the as well as the I'm sorry. Especially those long corridors, those long, very long hallways in school. I mean, I can't, like I said, doesn't it depends on the person. Depends like if it's your friend like from 50 miles, 50 feet away. You can start loading up a dap up, and everything. But even then, like seeing someone so far away, you kind of want to give them that space before you kind of greet them, because even if someone's so far away, I kind of wait a little bit. I kind of look at my phone, no matter if it's a friend, anybody. If they're super far away, I'm gonna look at my phone and be like, like going through it. But honestly, once they get close enough, that's when I let that. That's when they get into, like I said, going back to proximities. That's when they get into my public space or social space, for example. And I kind of want to talk about proxemities a little bit more, because this is a very important communication thing or theory, or also is a rule, for example, that we follow every day in life, and it goes well with sociology. But that the difference is when you think about public is grocery stores. Public is outside going outside into the street. Public is anywhere where you don't really need an invitation. For example, social is parties. You can need an invitation of some parties. A gym, for example, is a social and not public, but social. I mean, yes, it's public when you think about it, but it's public if it's an open gym. Most gyms, at least that I've seen or known, require a membership. So if it's a membership gym, it's a social. But if it's a public gym, it's public, of course. And then, like I said, the personal space is for the family, friends. Give a little hug, a kiss on the cheek, stuff like that. And intimate is for reserved for lovers and such, or boyfriends and girlfriends, whichever. And then when the rule breaks, though, we want to talk about what happens when this rule breaks, and it can break. So what happens, or what does it look like when this rule breaks? Sometimes it can be delightful. When a rule breaks, it's not always bad, bad, bad. But something, for example, like a delightful little old man, an old man just comes up to you and he's like, how's your day? You're sitting on a park bench, the old guy comes up to you, or on the bus, or, for example, and just comments on the weather. You talk about the weather, you talk about what's your favorite spot to eat in town or such. Other times though, it can be uncomfortable, like a stranger who just keeps staring too long. Even somebody just stares a little too long. It's that idea that we have to avoid this eye contact, or just feel like we're seen, you know. And in sociology, we talk about how most of these things, when they violate these norms or violate these rules in life, it's this norm violation. Most of the time, it's really harmless when you think about it. But then it's only harmless if it's a small act, That stands out because it goes against the script we're used to. If it's a big act, of course we're gonna know if it violated the norm violation or violated the law or whatever the hell they did that was more major. But like going back to that, we're all like cogs in a machine. If you don't oil up the cog, wait, hold up. You don't oil up the machine, and, it doesn't spin right with the cogs and everything. It goes against the script we're used to. We wake up and our mind's already coded to think of it like as a coding machine or a code. We're already coded a certain way, and if our part of our code is missing, or we're gonna glitch. It's gonna glitch out. But the same act can really be different, just depending on the context as well. One person's friendliness can be another person's red flag. So you're overly friendly, someone may see that as a red flag. You overly eye contact, you contact each other's eyes. What the hell? You you just kind of have that idea that if you're overly friendly, sometimes that can be seen as a red flag. So then going to the extroverts part over again, some people really, especially extroverts, I can be sometimes an extrovert myself. These folks from cultures with more open public norms just don't follow the civil and intention rule. This rule doesn't even apply to them. So you might be thinking, some of these norms or some of these rules don't apply to everybody. Yes, it's a norm because that's the majority of people that follow them. It's a normal thing for them to do. But for a lot of people as well, there's a small percentage or even a large percentage that don't follow this rule. But if it was a large percentage, then it wouldn't be a norm. But then, seeing that this is, some culture, some extroverts, they don't follow this rule. They want to talk to you. They want to, they see you in the elevator, they catch you. Oh, how you been, John? This and that. Or how you been, buddy? Like, stuff like that. They will talk to you. It's just something that they're used to, especially with a public personality. And sometimes it can be refreshing. It also highlights how strong we've internalized this law, this norm, that idea that in the public we kind of want to be in our own private bubble, which is crazy, because we're in public. We really don't have a bubble to be private in, but we kind of do. I guess like you think about it as like I don't know if a lot of you are gamers, but I'm going back to like Halo, Halo and Halo Reach, for example. There's this ability where you pop it, it's a little shield. Think of it as that in real life. You pop the little shield, and the shield of activation is your phone. You activate your phone, that automatically becomes a little shield around you because people get too close, it looks like they're going to start reading out your phone and stuff. So, once you pop your phone or whatever, you pop your phone out, that automatically becomes a little private bubble, which can be seen, in public, of course. So if you're in public, a lot of people, like I say, go use their phones because it activates that bubble, that little private bubble they want to be in. So this idea that people in public do have a private bubble, it just depends on the person, because some people feel like they do, some people feel like they don't. It's just context, the culture and such. That's all it really depends on. And I want to go over too, as well as pop culture. Pop culture is one of the things that thrive us. Looking back at that Halo reference I made, it's pretty crazy, but it kind of makes sense. It really does. I guess in some sense, right? But TVs and movies love this trope. For example, every elevator scene in The Office. It's hilarious. It's hilarious. They poke fun at this situation because it's such a old rule that this rule's been around for a long time. Even looking at Friends, for example, the way Chandler and Joey and Friends are always having these awkward hallway encounters because of the hallway. It's the hallway. It's this trope. And going back to like a show from the 90s. From the 90s, what's stopping it from being from the 80s as well? Like, this rule has been a long time in the works, not really in the works, but it's been a long time in society. Like, it's not something that just came up yesterday. It's been forever. Well, for example, Buddy in the movie Elf, standing way too close to people. It's just, we're kind of invading their space. They these scenarios really work because they play on this shared discomfort that these individuals have, and they exaggerate, they break it. They make us laugh at our own rules that we made. Society, these rules that we made, we're laughing at them because they're true. And even comedy sketches on TikTok and all these places, they poke fun of these hyper aware, how hyper aware we've become, in public, the overacting, the phone checks, the way we'll pretend to scroll. There's only 2% of our phone left, like I keep saying, like the jokes I keep making about my weather app having so many hours on my phone, because we're constantly checking our phone when we're surrounded by people, just to not have that, to avoid that eye contact, to avoid that being in this space that we're in. So these kind of key takeaways to take away from this podcast today is the civil intention. Keep that in mind. So every day, you're going through life, keep in mind that civil intention. Civil intention is one of those things, that happens every day. It might seem like a small thing, but it's actually very powerful, and social tool. It allows us strangers to share space without constantly invading each other's mental worlds or mental spaces, as well as proxemics. You want to be able to respect people's privacy, not privates, privacy. And these or privates as well. Hey, to each their own bowl of soup, I guess. But you want to keep this privacy in public. Want to keep it like that as such. But keep in mind that civil intention, proxemics, and just every day you're in life, just acknowledge sociology, because sociology is one of the factors that drives society forward. So next time you're in a bus, I challenge you to do this. Next time you're in a bus, in an elevator, walking down the hallway, in a room full of people, just in a public social setting, whichever, I want you to notice how many times you or other people performs this dance. How many times do you look at your phone? How many times do they look at their phone? And what are they actually on their phone to text somebody back, or are they just looking at the weather? And then when do you follow the rule? Is it when there's in the elevator, or is it in the hallway? When do you follow? Is it when people are super close? Like, when do you follow this rule? When do you break it? And how does this rule, feel when someone breaks it with you? I want you to comment all those things down below. I want you to let me know. Maybe DM me and such. I'll leave all my handles for my social medias down in the comment, or in the description below. But just make sure to comment down that below and just let me know. Have people done this to you? And keep those in mind, like civil intention, proxemics, and such. As well as stay tuned, because it's gonna be a weekly series for my podcast, The Social Lens, and follow my socials, keep up to date. And as well as next week, we'll be looking at a totally different but equally fascinating social rule. Keep that in mind. And it's gonna be like why memes have become this social currency. So none of this Bitcoin, none of this Dogecoin. That's when people have meme coins, because you think about it, because it's the meme aspect of it. But memes is the aspect that we're driving forward, and how sending these memes, or sending the wrong one, for example, can be social suicide. I'll see you then. Other than that, you have a great day.